Good morning. I call the Assembly Work Session with the Juneau Legislative Delegation to order at 7:16 a.m. and I welcome you all. Mr. Smith, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Of course, Deputy Mayor. We would like to acknowledge that the City and Borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the Indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Yonishish.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Ms. Atkinson.
Here.
Mr. Kelly. I'm not seeing. Walakida.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Hughes Candies is not joined us on Zoom yet. Mr. Bryson. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Atkinson.
She says needs to be run over by
That would make sense. We'll come back and give her roll call. Mr. Bryson.
Present.
Okay, Ms. Hale.
Here.
Mayor Weldon is not with us, and Ms. Hughes Candies, are you able to join us audibly?
I am, and I'm renaming myself now.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry about that.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Manager, are there any agenda changes? Thank you. I don't believe there are minutes. Are there minutes? No. Thank you. So our agenda is to hear an update from our legislative delegation. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Keel, Representative Hannan, and Representative Story. And if you would please introduce your staff to us. And perhaps even before we start with the update, we can ask Madam Manager to introduce key staff here. We have quite a lot of CBJ staff here. Might not get everybody, but would you mind doing that, Madam Manager, before we go ahead and start with Senator Keel?
Absolutely, I would love to. I have an amazing team here, as evidenced by the last 3 days of amazingness we've pulled off. So Beth McEwen, City Clerk, Rob Palmer, City Attorney. We all know Robert Barr, Deputy Manager. Going around the room, we have Angie Flick in the back. That's Finance Di, of course, Deputy Clerk. And we have Denise Koch. She's the Engineering and Public Works Director. So give her all the kudos for her hardworking plow staff. But also Carl Yucatel, Port and Harbor Director. His team has been working around the clock to unbury boats. Catherine Melville, Library Director. Jill Lawhorn, CDD Director. Dan Blido, and Land Manager Alex Pierce. Tourism Manager Ashley, why am I blanking? Heimbinger, and she put together your legislative priorities today. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce all these wonderful human beings.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager. And without further ado, Senator Keel, would you like to kick us off with an update?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of the Assembly. Thanks for having us here. Always a pleasure to start the session. We're in week 2 instead of week 1. I'm a little disoriented, but I'll try and get my feet back under me. I would love to take your invitation and introduce my staff, several of whom are here this morning, but we were at the office fairly late, so not everybody had early duty. I have a legislative intern this year, a University of Alaska Southeast student, senior, by the name of John Geckerman. He staffs me on the Senate Transportation Committee, and we're working on some legislation that I'll be introducing shortly, which he'll be carrying. I have here to my left, Kathy Schlingheide. You can raise your hand. Thank you. Who loves public attention as much as all legislative staff do. Who has been with my office since I was first elected to the Senate. She staffs me on the Senate Finance Committee. I don't think she has arrived yet, despite the incredible work of our plow crews come in from Oak Bay. Aurora Hawk is one of the most experienced staff people in the Alaska State Capitol building. And she staffs me on the Senate Judiciary Committee. She also does significant work for the entirety of the Senate Majority Caucus, and I'm fortunate to have her in my office. And then a couple of seats to my right, I have my newest permanent staffer, who's in her second year suffering through working in my office. Everyone else seems to enjoy it. Ms. Adkisson, who of course serves with all of you on the Assembly, she is lead in my office on Education Committee work, a topic of some concern locally as well as statewide. So those are the four people I am privileged to have working on behalf of our district in my office. And I just could go on and on about how much I appreciate them. Do we want to do staff introductions before we move on to content? What's your pleasure, Madam Mayor?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and do staff introductions first, and then we'll move on to content. Thank you, Senator Keel. Representative Hannan.
Thank you. Good morning. Representative Hannan, District 4. My two staff, I'm in the House. We do not have the luxury of the Senate having huge staff and direct lines to the Assembly. But my Chief of Staff, Tim Clark, is back here. He is my staff to the Finance Committee and has been with me 4 of the 5 years I've served. Hunter Meacham is over here. She does everything else. So if my husband wants to know if I'm available, he asks Hunter. She's in charge of most of the bills, everything outside of finance, but with a 2-person staff, they work very closely together. So thank you. And we had a late day yesterday at the House. We do have a hard stop this morning, Madam Speaker, about 8:45, because we have a caucus. Because there's some ongoing active issues that we're expecting to spend a lot of time on the floor tomorrow on, and Rep. Story and I need to be in a caucus on that this morning.
Thank you for that heads up. Representative Story. I almost called you Madam Story. Representative Story.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Really good to be with everybody today, and I really want to give my thanks to everyone who's been working on keeping the roads clean and the sidewalks clean. I tell you, we've had a floor speech from the Representative Roucher from Sutton, just thanking everyone for the unbelievable work they have seen, not the same caliber of safety measures that we have here. So that's really good for our capital city. Thank you. I am very fortunate to have Miranda Worrell working with me again this session. Miranda knows Juneau really well, born and raised here, went off to Dartmouth, has been back for a while, and staff's education with me. That is a passion of hers also, and so that's really valuable. And then this year I have Joan Wilkerson in my office, and I don't know how many of you know Joan, but she's been up at the Capitol Bill for a few years and was with Minority Leader last year, but is in my office, and she's got a wealth of experience, and so she's staffing me on state affairs. So Juneau's and Haines, Skagway, Clackawanna, and Gustavus are in good hands.
Thank you, Representative Story. And I am sorry, we also have the CEO of Bartlett, Mr. Ian Wardle. Would you please kind of raise your hand and introduce any staff you have here, please? Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you for that suggestion, Senator Keel, and kick it off. And we 8:45.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate that, and that always helps to give me a deadline when it comes to talking. Mr. Palmer didn't have to laugh that hard. I will start out, as others have, by mentioning the snow plowing. Most years, we get kudos and thanks from legislators who've come from, and staff who've come from all over the state, and thanks for the Welcome to Juneau reception. And while there was some appreciation for that this year, as always, I've heard from just about everybody about how good the snow plowing has been. And that is, of course, a huge thank you to the streets crew at Public Works, as well as our local DOT crews. And I know a whole lot of contract dump truck drivers when it comes to removal. So everyone has pulled together, and it has not gone unnoticed. And that includes people who are not just trolling their hometown mayor. That includes folks from all political persuasions. So it's been genuine. Briefly, the state of the state budget. When it comes to the governor's budget proposal that he submitted in December, there were a lot of unknowns. We are still looking for some of the major pieces of the governor's budget proposal to come to us. He has until February 15th to get those amendments in. It looks, just in broad strokes, like a flat budget. Certainly when it comes to service delivery, there are no massive cuts proposed. There are not any significant number of new programs or program expansions proposed. There are some things that we'll need to address as a legislature. One example is our means-tested senior benefits program. Folks with long memories may recall that came in after the demise of the Alaska longevity bonus. That sunsets this year, and so the legislature is going to have to extend that. I'm optimistic we'll do that. It's not in the budget till it's extended, right? So there's several tens, or I think maybe, is it 70 million? I ought to remember that number. I think it's about $70 million statewide. That sort of thing, as well as some unknowns in terms of federal funding and how the state will work with and provide our match for those things. Broad strokes, about probably a $4.6 billion operating budget when we talk about general funds. When we get all the amendments in, it might be 4.7. A governor's capital budget proposal of about $305 million general funds. We'll hear from our federal lobbyists about the federal money, I'm sure, which helps get that up to $3.5 billion total funds. We have some money in savings. The constitutional budget reserve is back to about $2.7 billion. That's our constitutional savings account. It's the one buffer we really have, as long as we're not willing to raid the permanent fund, and I think we're not. That's the one buffer we really have against massive drops in oil prices, huge drops in our investment income. But of course, our investment earnings from the permanent fund that can be spent sustainably, that's our largest source of state revenue. Hasn't been all you'd dream in recent years, but I think the risks that we'll run out of money in the spendable part of the permanent fund, the earnings reserve account, are relatively low. They're non-zero, so we're going to have to be careful, and it would really help if we had a balanced and stable, sustainable state fiscal plan, which I don't predict will pass in this election year. So what's all that mean for Juneau? Well, the capital budget, I think, is going to grow. I think there's some room within our current revenue picture with the price of oil being up, production being relatively flat. I should let folks know that that used to mean income was way up, and it doesn't. It means income's up a little bit, and that's just a result of having a net profits-based tax system. As there are major oil developments being built on the North Slope, you probably heard the name Willow in the news, you may have heard the name Pica in the news, big new oil fields. They're very expensive, and those costs are deductible from your taxes if you're an oil company. So instead of every dollar on the year-long average price of oil being good for $75, $80 million to the state, think more like 43, 44 million. So that's an important thing to realize about the state's revenue picture for the next 5, maybe 6 years, as those giant projects get built and brought online. I will let my colleagues talk about education because the House has been in the most immediate action on education. Suffice it to say, it is a key priority of our entire district and our entire delegation. Please don't let the fact that I'm not talking at length about it make you think it's not top of my list. But the other thing I will just update you on, a long-term priority of the Assembly and of mine, our whole delegation, has been to return public servants in Alaska to a real pension. We moved a pension bill out of the Senate Finance Committee yesterday. And I believe it will be headed to the Senate floor in the next week or two. A couple of details we have to get together. That is tremendous progress. You may recall from this conversation last year, I have set my own pension bill on the back burner. I'm helping my colleague, Senator Kathy Giesel of Anchorage, push her pension bill, which is what we moved yesterday. I don't care whose name's on it. We moved a pension bill out of Senate Finance and it's headed to the floor. With that, let me stop droning on and we'll turn to my colleagues. Thank you.
And before we move on to Representative Hannan, are there any brief questions for Senator Keel? I have one, Senator Keel. As a beneficiary of a good pension plan now, can you just let us know briefly the best way for us to advocate for a better pension plan for all of our younger colleagues who don't have that benefit?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the tools that are available to all Alaskans are available to members of the Assembly and to members of city staff. I think public comment on the bills as they move through committees. This bill, Senate Bill 88, will next get committee hearings in the House after it passes the Senate. For anyone who's not familiar, on the legislature's website, akleg.gov, there is something called Bill Tracking and Management, it's BTMF, Bill Tracking. And you can sign up to get emails or text messages when there are alerts about bills you care about. So you can put SB 88 in that and you get texts. That'll alert you to public testimony opportunities. You can send emails and write letters. The legislature's website also has addresses for every legislator in the state. And then, of course, local government bodies speak with louder voices because they speak on behalf of thousands. I know the Juneau Assembly has an official position supporting that. If somebody wanted to put a brand new resolution in the file, I don't think it'd be unappreciated.
Senator Keel. Representative Hannan, I know you're on the forefront of this education, as is Representative Story, so please go next.
Well, the House, jointly with the Senate, we met last week in a joint session to attempt to override the governor's veto of half the BSA money from FY24 that was vetoed last June. We were not successful in that, but that effort sort of accelerated the pace that we are dealing with things. So we've come out of the gate in the second half of the 33rd legislature, already up on step. We are not full in, and I'm in the minority, Representative Story and I, but the pace is pretty intense. That was last Thursday. We were on the floor in joint session at 8 p.m. It had been 3 days of continual negotiation to get us there. Lots of legal opinions back and forth of whether we were compelled to be there or whether it was optional. It may be precedent setting because our caucus argued, along with Representative Eastman, that the state constitution is directive. And although the legislature, using the word shall meet in joint session to address a veto, it has always been interpreted as shall if you call yourselves, if you have a majority of both bodies. But we were able to prevail, had that, and I think that has added to the pressure to take up Senate Bill 140, which is internet for schools, That's how the bill passed the Senate, but when it came to the House last spring, we shoved some other things in there last May. And so last May in the Finance Committee, we added transportation for schools, BSA, I think there was one other component, but that was in May. We were trying to get it to the floor in the last few days of session, thought it would become a vehicle to put a BSA increase outside into the formula versus one-time money. That didn't happen. The bill didn't come to the floor, so we start the second session with that bill in rules, poised to go to the floor, and already having expanded beyond internet for schools. And that's sort of become the big deal. You may have known last Saturday we had 6 hours of public testimony on that bill hosted by the Rules Committee. In everyone's memory, that was the first time the Rules Committee has taken a substantive policy hearing on a bill in their possession. Typically, they don't do hearings, they're just scheduling things. So the Rules Chair and leadership of the House are sort of managing things slightly different than tradition has. And we're anticipating a floor session tomorrow to work on this bill that could go all day. Tomorrow is when the bill is coming to us in second reading, and we actually don't know how many amendments, but we anticipate several hours of amendments on the floor tomorrow. Guess I've gotten distracted by the big element of the moment, and let me just segue back to the overall budget and a couple items that city always interested in. The House, we had our overviews this week with revenue, OMB, and then yesterday was Sledge Finance. And it was pointed out that the governor put money in the budget this year for community assistance. Someone did ask one of the freshmen on the committee, isn't this the fund that he vetoed the 30 million out of last year? Well, yes, but he's put it in the budget this year. But because of that trickle down effect of refilling, there would only be 20 million to distribute as opposed to the 30 million. The governor has school major maintenance in the budget, but to the tune of one project, $4 million. So not very much. And again, members of the committee said, well, this should be more, right? We should be maintaining more than one building a year at $4 million. And I don't think we put any money in for community harbors, but those were all things that impact local government. And I guess it is a step forward because they're at least in the governor's budget, and we have not seen that continually with Governor Dunleavy. So the fight to just get them in doesn't have to be made, but the fight to adjust the levels of those will be there. I think that's probably enough rambling from me.
Excellent rambling. Thank you, Representative Hannan. Are there any brief questions for Representative Hannan before we move on? Representative Story, last but not least, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wanted to add on a little bit about education after Rep. Hannan's good update. And that's basically give you a few numbers. Currently, right now, a $300 BSA permanent funding reoccurring, which is what we have been adamant about for several years, is in this omnibus education bill, which is about $2.4 million for Juneau. There is a separate bill that came out of the Senate at $1,000, and that is about $8 million for Juneau. The School Boards Association, Anchorage School District has been asking for $1,400. That number is really important because schools are in crisis across the state. That's actually the good part, because if it was just Juneau suffering, it would be really difficult. And we have a unique situation happening right now. But we know we have flat-funded education for 8 years now, 8 years. We know costs have gone up. We know inflation's been high. And so many people are always concerned about our one test score, the national one, saying our schools are failing based on this one NAEP score. It's kind of been the mantra of reporting on Alaska schools. And while that is one measure that we take seriously, I don't know about you, but I have been in our schools here. I've been in other schools across the state, and there are some great things happening all the time, and it provides such structure. After COVID, kids were thrilled, many of them, most of them, to be back in school. And we know our younger set, our kindergarten, first, second, all those younger grades, computer learning at home does not work for them. So we really have to look at our state, what kind of message are we sending with a teacher shortage, wanting kids to go into the profession here. Nationally, we have to be recruiting nationally because we don't have enough teachers to replenish our pool. We want to be saying, at least I know our caucus does, the Senators Caucus does, that, hey, Alaska cares about public education. This is a good place to come and work because we're going to do ongoing funding, and you can count on your job. You know, the next year we're not going to be saying, oh, we're going to cut again. So that's really important because we had a private business for many years here. People who work there, they wanted to know what kind of education are their kids going to get. So we appreciate that you have sent a strong message to us that that's really important to you. And we're working hard to get a sustainable, significant increase. And so there's many things in that education bill besides the BSA that I have some questions about. I don't think they've been thoroughly vetted. They haven't gone through the committee process. So watched closely. It's going to be an interesting time on education. I also wanted to give a compliment out to our community members, to this body, for your coming around the community with our terrible flooding event that we had this summer, and people are still suffering from that. Still lots of loose ends, and I've been impressed with how the community has tried to support people. We don't want to forget about checking in with them because some people have had more resources to weather that than others. We are looking at some legislation to increase the amount of disaster assistance. It hasn't been changed for a long time. And we know that people need more, and we're also looking at legislation to add in condominium homeowners association fall under the requirements of being able to get assistance. So there is that piece of legislation that we are working on. I wanted to also say about our university. It's very important to our community, and we have, what would I say? We have a bill, the Alaska Performance Scholarship Bill, that it needs to be modernized. And I was thrilled to be carrying that bill for the last few years, and last year got the House Education Committee to put in their own bill on this with the components that have been in the bill, which is increasing the amount of money per student. It is also expanding career tech classes to be able to be part of the curriculum that you take. And also it eliminates the SAT and ACT testing. And why it needed to be updated. This was Governor Parnell's signature piece of legislation that he passed, and the idea was to get kids in our state who want to take a rigorous curriculum to come to our local post-secondary education institutions. And so Senator Dunbar has introduced a companion bill on the Senate side. It's a very high priority of the university system. And there is money set aside, and right now the problem is we don't have enough students who are signing up for that. It also increases the amount of money per scholarship, so it goes from $4,500 to $7,500. And also the dates that the students would be notified is a lot sooner than is required by law. Lots of times people are making their decisions about post-secondary education sooner than in May, than November. And so the timeline is just a much smarter proposal going ahead. And one really great thing that the House Education Committee put, and there was an incentive, it's incentivized kids to pay attention to their studies. So if you get admitted on a silver level award, which is the second tier, and you get great grades in your next semester, they will up your amount award to the top tier. So really dynamic things, and I bring that up because we got to be talking about it more, because our university needs students to stay here, and that money is there. We just need to put more students in there. So that is a piece of legislation that we're pushing to have happen. Rep Stapp from Fairbanks has a major maintenance bill for the university, and that's setting aside and about $35 million a year to be used for maintenance in the general university system. And we're fighting every year for UAS to get more maintenance things done. So I think I'm just going to stop at that, and we'll get to questions. Thank you.
Before questions, I would just like to let everybody know that Assemblymember Paul Kelly has joined us. He was a bit snowed in this morning. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So school size is tied to funding, and it's been talked about for a couple of years. Is there anything that you guys could do to remove school size or the square footage from the base student allocation, so that way if a school needed to be closed, that the Juneau school district budget wouldn't be impacted? I know that our funding is tied to how many schools and how much square footage. Is there a way that we could get that part removed so the communities can reduce the size of their schools?
I'll just jump in on that, and if that's all right, Deputy Mayor, and then please chime in. I was going to say that school size is set because across the state, it's just very important for the different size schools we have. So it'd be very delicate to switch that, because the rural areas, those funding factors are really important. So that's my first comment on that. But I did want to say something when the school board is examining what to do with downsizing their schools, and as the assembly looks at their decisions, please ask them, how has your school size affected your graduation rates, your demographics of students who are graduating? Because I will tell you, with the opening of Thunder Mountain High School, our graduation rate increased, and we had 100% Alaska Native graduation rate on one of those years, and it's been very high. And that was what we were hoping would happen with smaller campuses, so the teachers knew and staff knew the students well, and could wrap around them. So I just put that out there, and for whatever configurations you're looking at, how are the students doing? What have been the effects? Because I know dollars are so important, but I also know how our students, and those are figures that I know from the past. I don't know what they are currently, so dig into that. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Thank you, Representative Story. Representative Hannon, and if I may also add that Superintendent Frank Hauser has joined us, and I believe he's in the back of the room. Thank you.
Let me just say that Assemblymember Bryson, your question is about one specific element of the base student allocation, the formula. And there's lots of dialogue out there about people wanting to address changes in the formula. So no one's saying I want to address the formula to tweak school size exclusively. And of course, if there is a bill to change the formula, the whole formula that has a bunch of elements, I'm of the school of thought that's not a good position for us to address at this point, because there's a million different things. I will tell you that the fight is more Anchorage Matsu about where's the base for 1.0 for the formula, where's the multiplier factors. And so there's a lot of tension and a lot of risk to opening up the formula. In general, when BSA formula rewrites have happened, there's usually been a lengthy period of study to look at how it impacts a number of districts. It's not, right now we're in the second half of a session. So I can't fathom that the politics around changing the formula itself could cohese and get done by May. If there is a bill that says we're going to do a 2-year study and address a formula, then small school size certainly would be a component in that. But right now, from where I sit, we've got more to lose in a formula rewrite than to gain. And so I'm not interested in pushing a BSA formula rewrite bill. I'd want to put our energy into securing a change to the BSA, an increase to the BSA.
Thank you, Representative Hannon. And Mr. Bryson, that was a really good question. Mr. Keel, Senator Keel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, Mr. Bryson, there's great news. Square footage isn't in the formula. So hooray, no, I'm kidding. But the good news is that the square footage calculations come in on the capital side. So when the city puts in for the Riverbend roof or the DZ roof, both of which are on that list, square footage gets evaluated. And it's a per student calculation and it varies. When it comes to operating funding, it's student count. And so the school size factor isn't physical size, it's number of students. That said, I just have to agree with Representative Hannon's comments about large scale, about rewrites of significant elements of the formula. Something like that school size factor is going to be of interest to literally every district in the state. There is one discrete proposal out there having to do with how much we pay for correspondence students. That is technically an element of the formula, but it's, I guess it doesn't have the same ripple effects. And so I won't repeat what Representative Hannon said about the difficulties of a major piece of the formula. Understanding the implications to operating budgets and whether they're flexible.
Thank you very much. Senator Keel, are there additional questions? Thank you very much for that update. It was really valuable, and you guys have certainly started off with a bang, I must say. I'd like to move on to our DC lobbyists. We have Katie Catchell and Dave Jansen here with us, and maybe we can, and we have Kevin Jardell. Where is Kevin? Oh, there he is. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll start with our CBJ state lobbyist, Kevin, and then we'll move on to Katie and Dave. Sorry about that, Kevin. I did not mean to skip you.
There we go. All right. Yeah, thank you. As usual, our delegation did a very thorough job of walking through everything. So not a lot to add, but a few things to touch on, or a different way of looking at things or saying it. We pretty much are in the same place we were last year. The permanent fund dividend size is going to drive a lot of the pressure on how much money there is for the capital budget to expand. I think there certainly was some room left for the legislature intentionally to give them some room to spend on capital projects. But how much money is there at the end, that pressure from the size of the dividend really impacts what additional things get funded. Right now, with a statutory dividend, it's about $1 billion deficit. If you go to a $1,300 dividend, which was this year's roughly $1 billion surplus, there still is, Senator Keel pointed out, some amendments to the governor's budget that will bump it up. There's some Medicaid funding and a few other things that we expect to come in. So, that's the rough numbers, big ballpark, big picture. And somewhere in between those, the legislature will settle down and give us an answer to those. In a lot of the building right now, energy in the rail belt continues to take a lot of the air out of the building. They're dealing with some real potential shortage of energy in the near term, and so that's got a lot of people's attention. Education is the parallel with that. They don't have a lot of tools for energy, so it's a lot of conversation. Education is really within their bailiwick, but we'll see starting tomorrow kind of where the House comes out, which is really the start of the conversation for this year. The Senate and the House will have to negotiate that out. We'll see where it is. I think 300 is the absolute floor, and I think it will be above 300 BSA increase in the end. But it's really a negotiation between the House and the Senate and the governor. Because even if the House and Senate agree to a piece of legislation to change the BSA, there's an appropriation that has to fund that formula. And the governor still has the ability to reduce that appropriation, which impacts the formula. And so we haven't seen that done before, but it's an issue that makes it a three-party process to figure that out. But I absolutely expect an increase in the BSA to pass, but we don't know what it's going to be yet. The other thing that we're getting a lot of attention on, I know that's really important to Juneau and everyone here, is the vacancy rate within departments and agencies throughout the state, not just Juneau. That the population demographics of the state and the workforce issues is taking a lot of people's attention and focus. It's a significant issue, and there's not a lot of solutions on the table, but it's certainly the recognition of the problem is coming about. So I expect a lot more attention and discussion on those issues. We have a fantastic packet from City Manager Kester and her team, as always. And so we'll be pushing those with the delegation to see what we can all work on together and agree to push through into session. And then we'll be monitoring, all the other issues that we usually do, Marine Highway and roads and everything else. But right now it's a pretty flat status quo budget. And so not a lot of cuts to put back or worry about. It's really a lot of monitoring going forward on these issues. With that, that's what I have. If you have questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jardell. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Jardell? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Not totally sure how to phrase this. I think there's been some desire, is there a pathway towards the city attaining or getting ownership over the second and Gold parking lot, the kind of decrepit one on the corner over by the Baronoff? Anyway, maybe not so much a question, but just
the mayor, thank you. We've actually been engaged with the Commissioner of DNR. Commissioner Boyle has some issues that he wants to deal with, and so we've added this to the list of issues that we want to deal with. And so I think there is a possibility of that. The state has not shown an indication of wanting to upgrade that facility so that its full use can be utilized. And so we are engaged on that and trying to work that. And I think without commenting on the probability, it's certainly within possibility.
Good question, thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Jardell before we move on to Ms. Catchell? Ms. Catchell, intern now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Another January trip, but this one much snowier. Got here very safely Tuesday night and on time and actually a little bit early. So appreciate everyone's hard work in keeping the streets clear and the sidewalks clear. So it's been great and beautiful to look at. So Washington, D.C., we are also in our second session in Congress, and best I could say is that all of our Juneau priorities were aligned and were positioned. It's just a matter of getting these bills across the finish line. We have a number of items in the appropriations bills. We call them earmarks. The Senate calls them congressionally directed spending. The House calls them community project funding. We can call them earmarks. We have a couple in a couple of the appropriations bills. We have a couple of items in some policy bills that direct the Army Corps of Engineers, a policy bill that outlines programs, reauthorizes programs for the FAA. So these items are pending in the bills that would benefit Juneau. It's just a matter of getting them across the finish line. And, that's a matter of agreements between, on larger issues and bigger bodies of government and human nature. So we all know how that goes. I would first like to give a picture of, the appropriations process in terms of these earmarks that are kind of pending, in a pending status, because it impacts our strategy going forward. There's a saying in Washington, hurry up and wait. That's what we're going to have to do again for the next budget cycle. We don't know if we're going to have our projects across the finish line in this budget cycle, but you know what? We got to start preparing for the next one. And it depends on whether Congress can get its act together, whether we have to resubmit those projects or have some backups to submit new projects, because we want to have every bite at the apple that we can possibly take. And we'll get into that a little bit later on the fourth agenda item. But just kind of overall deadlines, March 1st is one of the first deadlines for Congress to pass the budget. Are they going to kick the can again? What's called a continuing resolution. By the way, the budget was supposed to be passed by October 1st. We're, a couple months late. And so when it gets to around the March time, do we just kind of kick the can for the rest of the year? So it's a critical decision point. Hopefully they fund the rest of the year, and that would include our earmarks. But if they do kick the can, the continuing resolution, those projects would not survive. We would have to resubmit them. So we'll be watching that closely. The first deadline is March 1st, I mentioned, and it's broken up into different bills. March 1st would have the Auk Bay wave attenuator in the energy and water appropriations bill. And then March 8th is the next target, and those have our two other projects, Bartlett Hospital and police radios. So we're dealing with, it's the first time Congress has done this, bifurcated the continuing resolution, but it's kind of made life interesting in DC. But I'm thinking that if, Congress addresses the March 1st deadline, they'll be able to address the March 8th deadline, optimism. So I'm hoping that we can make a game time decision on our projects and just have backups and just make sure we take every chance that we can get at these opportunities. With that said, on FY24, there's an agreement on the top lines, which is huge. These are just overall numbers. And so the subcommittees have to allocate among the committees how much they have. And the subcommittees contain like the different federal departments, which contain the three projects for Juneau, whether it's Army Corps of Engineers, that would be Auk Bay wave attenuator, Labor, Health and Human Services, that would be the Bartlett Hospital project, and then Commerce, Justice, Science, and that would be the police radios. So stay tuned on appropriations. For now, well, this is another appropriations item, but in a programmatic sense. Dave, you want to take it away?
Sure, Katie, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for having me here again and for providing me with breakfast. It was delicious. I just want to speak briefly to the acquisition of an icebreaker by the U.S. Coast Guard and what we've been able to continue to work with both the Coast Guard and with the Alaska Delegation and where we are in that process. I think, as most people know, in the fiscal year 23 appropriation for the Department of Homeland Security, there was money that had been included, for $130 million for the Coast Guard to purchase commercially available icebreaker. Unfortunately and mysteriously, In the final conference report, that money vanished. So the Coast Guard was left with nothing to actually move forward on that acquisition. The good news, however, is that the Coast Guard remains, fully committed to this, and they have included a request for $130 million in the FY24 budget, which again is presently pending. The other, good news also is, as part of the legislation that we were successful in getting through Congress to authorize the conveyance of the NOAA Pier, either to the city and borough or to have it transferred to the Coast Guard. We gave the Coast Guard right of first refusal authority to effectively say, no, we want that. And, the Coast Guard has acted on that authority. They did transmit a letter to NOAA in February of last year that said they wanted to act on that authority. So NOAA knows that this is now going to be a agency to agency transfer as opposed to a conveyance, which actually makes it a much more straightforward transaction for the agencies. That's good news. Also, another very positive sign was that when Admiral Fagan, the Commandant of the Coast Guard, testified last year on the budget submittal, she again stated the Coast Guard's strong support for having an icebreaker, up here. So this is something where, we're fortunate that the Coast Guard is not backing off one bit. They want to support this. They've acted on the authority we've given them. That was followed up recently by a letter that was sent from Senators Sullivan and Murkowski, again, pushing to try and see if there is going to be an interminable, continuing resolution that the appropriators allow what's known as an anomaly to allow funding outside of the previous fiscal year to go forward for the acquisition of an icebreaker. As well, they also want to see the Coast Guard's program to rebuild and recapitalize its icebreaker fleet also fully funded. So more good news is that the Alaska delegation remains, again, foursquare in supporting, getting funding for the capital acquisition and to move forward with the redevelopment of the NOAA Pier. Unfortunately, the Coast Guard, they're a little stuck in that they want to have the asset before they begin developing the laydown plan to redevelop that pier. But we're continuing to work with them. And again, how goes appropriations will determine really the timeline for how quickly the Coast Guard can act in conveying, or actually in getting the property transferred from NOAA, and then in working with the city to basically begin the capital planning that's going to be needed to clear all the permits and actually get, the ground moving and piers rebuilt. Just one other, item that, sorry about that, technical difficulty. Was also, the Auk Bay Wave attenuator. We were successful in getting language in last year's Water Resources Development Act, which authorized as, a study, for the feasibility of that project. That doesn't come with funding, but it is a precursor that is necessary before the Corps can initiate a study. So what we are now doing is going back to try to work with the appropriators so that we can have the money actually, put in the Coast Guard's budget as a, congressionally directed spending item so that they would be able to move ahead with a feasibility study with the federal match. That's something that we've heard nothing but, positive remarks from, the Court District Office on it. But it still, again, remains to be seen whether or not, with the current budget impasse, what, the Corps' top line number is going to be. and whether or not they're going to be able to, find, relatively small amount of money, about $1.5 million. But nonetheless, it's money that they can't distribute until they have, a final budget. So that's where we stand with those two projects right now.
Another project that is pending out there where Juneau is, strategically in the bill, but the bill is not passed yet, is an item for the airport, and it's language that would allow money for runway safety lighting equipment to be covered by the FAA, to be maintained and covered by the FAA, and allow Juneau Airport to use their federal AIP money to install the lighting equipment and then have the FAA take care of it. And that is in the FAA bill, the House version, and that's a must-pass bill. They hopefully will not, extend that again. That was supposed to pass last year. But again, it's larger issues that are holding that up. Disagreements over how many flights can fly out of DC Ronald Reagan National Airport, and pilot training. So it's been hung up on that, but that bill has either got to be extended or passed, and we're hoping, we're positioned in the bill, so hopefully people can come to agreement on getting it done. Speaking of done, there are a couple of things that we have been able to successfully get across the finish line. That's in the area of federal grants. As alluded to, I think earlier, some of the federal funding that's been secured by the City and Borough of Juneau, and kudos to the grants teams for picking the projects and putting the applications together, and then we've been successfully helping them along the way and getting them the congressional delegation support. And the big one, of course, is the Juneau-Douglas North Crossing. So that was one of the largest planning grants that was funded under RAISE. It's a big one. So it's really exciting that we can actually get to work on that project. And a couple of other small ones, but still important, the Safe Streets for All in the area of Lemon Creek, which is, moving the ball forward in that neighborhood, which I understand is a priority as well and very important. But we're going to be building on those federal grants in this next year. The appropriations is causing some kind of pressure on getting these grants out because the appropriations bills fund these grant programs. But again, hurry up and wait. We're going to get ready for them as they come out, and we'll be helping Juneau with a strategy on when to apply, how to project scope it, how to, not only what's eligible, but what's competitive, because that's really important. And getting, of course, a congressional delegation support, which they've been very, very helpful with. And yeah, again, going back to the operating environment and getting these competitive grants. Dave, do you want to kind of?
Sure. I mean, it is going to be an issue, and we've already been hearing it from the agencies who have, they're really kind of faced with an unenviable position of, the current administration pushing them as hard as they can to get money out the door, but Congress, on the other hand, being recalcitrant in its work and not clearing the appropriations bills so they can actually get their money to get it out the door. This is causing a lot of the agencies to try and expedite the process, and the upcoming grant cycle is going to be compressed just because with the election pending at the end of the, November, well, beginning of November at the end of the year, it's going to, they're going to try and front load as much as they can, which means they'll probably issue what are known as like skinny notices of funding availabilities that are then followed on by fuller documents that provide really more requirements. But it's going to be a process where you might actually, as we've heard for the Port Infrastructure Development Program, that the Department of Transportation may actually look to actually take proposals for 2 fiscal years, because there is the money that is out there that's already been appropriated through the bipartisan infrastructure law and through the Inflation Reduction Act. So there's already a pile of money that's available that can be distributed. on top of whatever Congress ultimately ends up appropriating for fiscal year, 24. So that's why everybody's just going to have to be very alert to when notices for availability come out, to the extent that, you can have, your priorities in a line so that you know exactly what you want to ask for, so that you can work with the delegation so that they understand that. You'll be in a much better position, to be able to get an application in that, will be competitive and stand a much better chance of getting funded. But it's just going to be a different year in that regard because of the compression and the fact that the agencies, they're not going to be able to obligate, new money under, because they can't do that under the CR. But there's still going to be money out there because of the appropriations that have been made in those two very large appropriations bills that passed, back in 2021 and 2022.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen and Ms. Gatchell. That was very helpful. Are there questions? I see, Ms. Wall, you have a question.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Putting aside the challenges of getting things over the finish line, it feels like we've had a lot of success in the last few years. I mean, I've only been in the Assembly for 3 years, but it feels like a lot of our priorities are always getting closer to that finish line. Is that because there's more money out there, our fabulous lobbyists, our delegation? What do you think is responsible for kind of the amount of success we've had?
Well, we've had, I think the congressional delegation is positioned. We have Representative Peltola on the House TNI committee. That's helpful. We have Senator Sullivan on commerce, very helpful. And of course, Senator Murkowski on appropriations. I think our delegation is on key committees where, and then that's where it starts. The protocol is you have an annual Army Corps of Engineers bill. It's called WRDA, Water Resources Development. It's every year. There's a chance, and they take requests, and so we put our request in, and you do have to kind of run the traps and make sure it's not controversial. But by virtue of having people on that committee, it's meant a huge difference. Same with appropriations. I mean, it's usually the folks on the committee, and it's by seniority. They get kind of a larger share of the pie. So it's just always, knowing who our delegation is and where they sit and how they can best be helpful, and having great projects and aligning all of that and just being really diligent on it, and, knowing the deadlines and sending reminders to congressional staff. Did you put this in? I think it, and just checking along the way, babysitting. So I think all of those things come into play.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act really were, transformative in terms of the scope and scale of funding that was provided outside of the normal appropriations process. And then also for Alaska, I mean, it's been beneficial in that there were priorities under this administration to provide assistance for rural and underserved communities and indigenous communities. So, the agencies are looking, for projects that can advance those priorities. So it certainly has, skewed the analysis to the benefit of Alaska. And I think that's probably why the delegation has had some success or greater success in getting projects approved and funded.
Thank you for the question. And I'd also like to add that our staff has done a really great job in putting applications together and identifying options and possibilities. So are there other questions right now? I would like to point out that Rahal Gadak left us about 8 o'clock. She had another meeting. So are there other questions? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. On the icebreaker, just curious if there's things that we can be doing as a community, as assembly if that money ever happens to, increase our probability or chance of having it based here.
Yeah, I mean, I know that, we continue to work, with the Coast Guard and with the delegation, to communicate, their continued strong interest and to voice, that, the city and borough, they are strongly supportive of having a capital vessel, home ported, in Juneau. It certainly never hurts, to restate that, and not be shy about it. And I know, talking with, Carl, you could tell that, he'll be traveling back there and he'll have the opportunity to, again, restate, the CBJ's interest in having that happen. And we're also, again, when I spoke yesterday with the industrial liaison in the Congressional and Governmental Affairs Office at the Coast Guard, just to make sure that, that when they do begin their planning process, that they're integrating it, with Katie and her staff. So again, it meets and fits in with whatever, the coastal plans are, in the city and borough, and addresses your needs as well. But certainly, we will continue to bang that drum. It never hurts for there to be additional resolutions, passed by the assembly to, voice that support officially. But, we have clearly communicated to the Coast Guard that this is something that is wanted, very, very much so.
And I think just supporting the congressional delegation in what they're doing, following their lead. They wrote letters to OMB. We're going to write a letter to Office of Management and Budget, with our support for this as well.
Thank you, Ms. Catchell, and Representative Story, and then Mr. Smith.
I wanted to add, again, our thanks. We didn't thank the federal delegation for all they have done to get the federal infrastructure money coming to Alaska. It's been transformative. We would really be in trouble if we didn't have that. And I know we all work together, different levels of government, and when we think about what we can do, childcare, really important. When I was at the Chamber of Commerce meeting last year, there was a person from the Coast Guard there saying and thinking about having the iceberg come. If you in your community do not have childcare, it's things we look at. What is the infrastructure you have to support our families here? And they want strong schools, and they have to have childcare spots or their people can't work. And so I know you guys have really been on that here. When people look at why are we supporting childcare, it's an economic issue. And the state gave $7 million towards childcare last year. There's a big push. We're trying to get more money in the budget this year. We recognize it's an issue all across Alaska. The one other thing, here we go, defined benefits. The ferry, we have, from the federal delegation monies, we have optimized that in our state budget. We have enough money, we could have ran an extra ferry last summer, but we did not have the staff to do that, which helps all of our communities, helps economics. And so this year, it's the same thing. We're keeping our fingers crossed. By April, we should know if we have enough staff to run another ferry. And so that's where all these pieces of policy can really help. And so I think it was really astute. Mr. Jardell talking about how important the administration, the governor, is on board with key policy that can help Alaska do really well. And one of them is looking at what we can do with defined benefits to help retain people. And our budget for funding, I mean, our ferry problem a lot is private marine institutions, cruise ships, they pay a lot more than we pay our ferry workers. And so there's some investments you can be urging us and the third floor to be investing in, and we will try and align all these pieces necessary for our economic development. So thank you.
Yeah, that's so very helpful to have the state and local skin in the game, the match. That's really a key piece of all of this.
Yes, and thank you, Representative Story, for weaving that tapestry so well. You brought in Senator Keel's mention of defined benefits. It's all part of that same tapestry. Representative Story, one more point, Mr. Smith, and then I'd like to move on to legislative priorities because I do know we have that hard stop deadline.
It is just a brief comment, and that is I wanted to thank Mr. Barr for his help with childcare. They are looking at your municipal programs in the childcare task force that the governor has assigned, and I believe you sit on that committee and have put lots of hours into it. So kudos. Thank you.
Very much. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I assume that when we finalize our assembly goals, we send them to the delegation and lobbyists as well. But they're not, it's not the revised ones aren't adopted yet. I believe we'll adopt them next week, but we did have support on the Assembly to introduce one that has language something similar to collaborate with U.S. Coast Guard partners to clear local hurdles and icebreaker home porting efforts. And anyway, we share that, and hopefully, I think we'll see anyway, I think staff knows what that means and knows it's childcare and housing. And anyway, just to put out as kind of an official thing that we're willing to do what it takes to make that happen. So anyway, hopefully I assume we share those with people when they're done. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for weaving that in, and that was a world-class segue, because that's exactly right. These legislative priorities are draft. However, we are going to look at them and finalize them next week, or we're going to look at them and if not finalize them, at least take the next step to finalizing, and we will get them to you. I also wanted to point out that Patty Watto, our airport director, is online if anyone has any questions. But now we will move right straight to our city manager, Katie Kester, to walk us through the legislative priorities. And again, we are looking at that hard stop deadline of 8:45.
You, Deputy Mayor Hale. So you have before you the draft legislative priorities for the city and borough of Juneau. As Deputy Mayor Hale mentioned, these will be discussed at the Committee of the Whole meeting on the 29th and then formally adopted in the first meeting in February to make the CAPSIS deadline of February 16th. We hear that loud and clear. Just to talk a little bit about the process for these priorities, we start back in October and gather input from all of our boards and commissions, and then it trickles through the Assembly a couple of times. The Assembly members all rank these priorities, and then of course they discuss them as a body, giving time for the public to chime in on it. All that to say that while this is a draft list, this is very near the finish line. So we suspect it will look pretty similar when we upload it into CAPSIS and we provide our state and federal delegation with a shiny book and fully fleshed out CAPSIS entries. In a former life, I was in charge of making sure communities got in those CAPSIS entries, so I know how important it is. A little bit about the projects. The purpose of this list is not only to give you all as our decision makers higher up the chain the resources you need to advocate for our community, but also to provide a little bit of visioning for our community for some of those bigger picture projects. So you'll see that the number one priority right now is the Juneau Douglas North Crossing. As Ms. Catchell mentioned, we were successful in getting a RAISE grant for that. So that project is funded through design. We will be finishing up the planning and environmental linkages study this summer and moving straight into NEPA. So we still don't have a preferred alternative. That will be part of the NEPA process. So that project we're just trying to push along so that we are able and competitive to apply for construction funding. And when we do make that application, there will be a local match, as Ms. Ketchel mentioned. That's so important when we're going after these federal dollars. So that will be some of the heavy lifting that the community will be doing over the next year in trying to figure that out. Priority number 2, Telephone Hill redevelopment. Thanks to Senator Keel, we actually own the property on Telephone Hill and have been making a strong effort to do some public outreach on what that would look like, and the Assembly will be discussing that at their February 12th meeting and really taking in all the public input. We've had public meetings and surveys and giving staff some direction on that. So I won't go too much further down the list. The project descriptions are all in here. Please give me or my staff a call if you have any questions on them, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I want to highlight that in addition to this being a state list where we try to provide you a broad list of projects to choose from, I know that it depends on kind of like what the mood on the Hill is, what you're able to fund. We also pull from this list to submit to the federal delegation, as Ms. Catchell said, and that's a little more nuanced. She mentioned we may be submitting the same projects as last year. We may be pulling projects from this list. So if maybe she could speak a little bit to the types of projects on this list that would be that we would be submitting. I think that will help the Assembly as they think about the two different lists, right? One that goes to the state and one that goes to the federal government, because though they're pulled from the same list, they have kind of different flavors.
Thank you. And sometimes there has been that question of, the exact priorities. And I know a lot of the boards and commissions really struggled with their priorities. And really, as we have come to understand, the precise priorities on the list are less important than the fact that we have projects on the list, so that if opportunities arise. So Ms. Catchell, can you kind of carry that forward?
Yes, that's absolutely right, because it's not necessarily a number in priority unless you have projects competing in the same bucket. And that's something that we want to avoid. We don't want to have two projects in the same appropriations subcommittee bill, because that's making the delegation choose which project. So if we could, kind of go through this and pinpoint which one out of, maybe two projects, and for example, and this is not a great example because one of them is pending, but the wastewater treatment, fats, oils, and grease item, and then also the composting. Those two are in the same bucket in terms of the federal appropriation. So that's where we would decide which one do we want to submit in which year. Lemon Creek Multimodal Path, that's a transportation bucket. So we would not want to ask for another transportation grant in the same earmark cycle. I was looking at the museum. They have not come out with the appropriations guidance for FY25. It's a possibility they could earmark more buckets, for lack of a better term. The bucket I'm thinking in particular for the museum would be the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That was a bucket that was earmarked pre-FY, I think it was 10, that they had earmark ban started. So hopefully they can earmark that, because that could be an area where the museum could potentially get an earmark. We would want to be really careful not to have that compete with Capitol Civic Center, because there's some elements of that project that could be museum-like as well. But that's just a consideration that we need to think about. I looked at this workforce housing item, and I think there might be a way to look at that. It's just optically, just a little red flag goes up, because this is a ski area. It might kind of not optically play well against, say, a workforce housing development in like depressed Detroit. I mean, just optically, we would have to kind of really think about that one. And I think, skate parks are hard optically as well. I would put that in a category of, swimming pools and turf fields, and that's we kind of want to steer away from those types of things, unless it's like part of like a community center for like underserved communities or something. Parking garages, not typically funded as a transportation item, because especially with this administration, they're very transit and public transportation forward. If I were to select a parking garage, it would have to be connected to a bus stop or something. Some park and ride would make that a more desirable project. For the school building improvements, I want to say that there's not earmark buckets for capital school projects, bricks and mortar, they would call it. I have to double check that. I think it's more, the earmarks for schools are more programmatic and not for bricks and mortar, but I'd have to double check that. Harbor rebuild, I mean, there's a grant program and a budget account. I believe PIDP was earmarked in the Senate. Yes, so that could be an earmarkable project, but we want to make sure that it's not competing with any other docks and harbors projects in the appropriations bill.
Well, one thing with the Port Infrastructure Development Program, in the last reauthorization in the National Defense Authorization Bill, because it's the Maritime Administration Program, Congress did authorize a set aside for small and inland, ports, to be eligible for I think it's 15% of available funding for their projects.
leave it to the legislature to add. So I do expect that harbor grant fund money to be in there, and I think we're on a pretty good position on that list. So it may not need to be a direct, but again, having it on here to let people know is important. So I look at this list and nothing jumps out at me as you shouldn't put this on the list. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Jardell. Senator Keel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor, excuse me. Yeah, I think Mr. Jardell put it well. It really is a good working relationship. It's a strong collaborative relationship. Our Senate district includes Gustavus and Haines and Klukwan and Skagway. And of course, the state budget is a statewide document. But we all do happen to live in Juneau and have a deep understanding of most of these projects and the benefits they bring. So alas, we can't follow direct instructions in numbered order. But we do really appreciate the opportunity when we can find some funds within the state budget to benefit the capital city. Some of what we'll consider will sound familiar from what our federal team has just talked about, right? All money is green, yes, but sometimes it flows in various directions. If there is, as we heard earlier, and as I suspect there will be, a significant investment in electrical power or energy or natural gas in the rail belt, there will be a strong interest in making sure there's statewide balance in investing in electrical infrastructure and energy. And so there are ideas. Certainly there's one electricity project on this list, other things in our region as well that could benefit and really help us all along. I will say that we're never shy about picking up the phone and calling the city team. None of you should ever be shy, not that I see any faces around here who meet that description, about calling us with your thoughts. And we'll work as creatively as we can, right? If American Samoa can grab some of our Federal Infrastructure Act ferry money, and they did, there's no reason we shouldn't go after Mississippi River Harbor money, by golly. And likewise, we work with, I know all of you work with the administration, the executive branch on trying to make sure Juneau's needs are met. We got a notice just in the last day or two that DOT has put some of the improvements, not all of the improvements we need at the Egan-Yandukan, that intersection by Fred Meyer, into the STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan. That's progress. They cited, among other things, the city's resolution on that issue as one of the factors that helped bump it up the list. So we'll continue to work with you on all that, and we appreciate this list, and definitely the opportunity to work with the city makes it easier to fund these things. When, as I think you said, there's local match or local skin in that game, that's more attractive to our colleagues as we support the funding requests we put forward.
Thank you so much, Senator Keel. Mr. Smith, tiny comment, and then I need to wrap up because we've got people who have to go.
Yes, I just wanted to recognize Kara Hollett's staff to Senator Sullivan and Murkowski in the room. So just another key person who works with this great team around the table to advance our priorities. Helps on, I've talked with her about Icebreaker as well as social security benefits, like all federal options. And anyway, just wanted to recognize her as part of the team that works for Juneau. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. And I just, Representative Story, I just have a note that's been handed to me that someone just called to report hitting a white Toyota 4Runner with a pit bull that is parked in the alley behind City Hall. I don't see anybody jumping up and running out there. So Representative Story, and then we'll wrap up.
Just wanted to thank you for the list. And also, I think about what I hear from our constituents, and you do in town too, and housing is, like a #1 priority. And just, it would be helpful if someone contacted me and how the different lists here relate to housing. I don't know if you ever, I haven't, anyway, I just am always concerned about what we can be doing to meeting our housing needs. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Representatives, how they relate to what?
Housing.
Housing. Okay, thank you. Before we wrap up, I did want to just comment, I'm glad that the 16B shore power electrification was on there. This has been a priority the entire time I've been on the Assembly, and I'm in my 6th year, and I feel very ineffective about this. So, boy, if we could get some funding to move that along, I would really appreciate it. And I also want to make sure everyone knows that housing is a top priority for this Assembly, and we are working very hard. It relates to the icebreaker, it relates to the economy, it relates to everything. So I just want to wrap up by expressing my profound thanks to Senator Keel, Representative Story, Representative Hannan for being here. I know you need to rush off. Thank you so much for everything you do, and for our lobbyists and everyone in the staff that has been here, and of course, our amazing Madam Manager. So thank you all for being here for this. We really appreciate you. I will gavel out.